G'day, g'day, wherever you may be watching in the world. My name's Tony Jack the Bear Manson. Welcome to Deluxe Mastering in Melbourne, Australia, where I am doing the new album for A Sound of Thunder, a great American metal band from Washington, DC, who are doing their 10th anniversary album. And I have had the privilege and the honor of doing this record, which has been mixed by my good friend Kevin Gutierrez at Assembly Line Studios in Austin, Texas. Apparently that's the way you say it, it's Austin. So big shout out to all my Austin friends. So today we're going to be giving you a little bit of an insight into what happens during a mastering session. I'm going to try and explain as best as I can the process. There are some Q&As that you have kindly sent in to the band, and we're just going to have some fun. So hopefully you can hang about, watch the process. I'll explain things as I go along, and hopefully we'll be able to demystify the process of mastering. Hope you enjoy yourselves. So you guys were invited to send in a few questions about mastering, and I'm very happy to answer some of the most often asked questions. First one, which I think was an obvious one, is what is mastering? One of those things that people don't still understand as much as mixing and recording and producing records. So mastering is the process of taking someone's final mix and then putting it through a process to optimize the sound, to help make it sound better. So we want it to sound complete, cohesive, finished off, like a store-bought one, as I would tell my clients. So I use different kinds of tools: equalization, compression, limiters in both analog and digital, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. But essentially I'm taking the finished stereo mix, putting it through a process to optimize the sound, make it sound as good as possible, so that not only does it sound great, but it'll play well irrespective of whatever playback system you put it on, whether it's on your phone, which a lot of people are listening to these days, a laptop, great big stereo system, a club system, on the radio, anywhere. The only difference really when it comes to mastering, as far as I'm concerned, comes down to vinyl, but that was one of the other questions, and we'll answer that one in a jiffy. Okay, so when I'm mastering a track, I'm running the unmastered version through the equipment, and I'm constantly A/Bing between the unmastered and mastered version to see what exactly it is that I'm doing. I'm trying to work out what sort of compression, what sort of equalization that I'm going to be using, and I'm constantly A/Bing between the two. So working on this right now. This is track 11 on the album, and so I'm just working away. I like to try and monitor at not too loud a level, but every now and again it's good to be able to, you know, goose it up like this. You know what I mean? Anyway, so very often I'm going between the unmastered version into the mastered version, see what's going on. May need to do a little bit of adjustment. It's always very fine, it's always very subtle, so I'll just be doing very small things. Before, after. So I'll just keep going back and forth doing this until such time as I feel it's right. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do. Homer Humphreys III, is that your real name? Is that really? I love it when people have like a second or the third or junior or senior, or I love that. So lots of high end. I don't know whether you're saying that's good or bad, but yeah, there's plenty of high end, there's plenty of bass, there's plenty of mid range, there's plenty of everything in this. But if it does sound a bit bright, probably because of the microphone on the laptop. As I said, I've got Neil Tilbury from Neil Tilbury Films in here. He's my video guy. He does all my content. And we're going to put together a really nice little package where we're just going to run through a little bit more of what I do and what I'm doing, which is mainly going to be for the A Sound of Thunder fans who contributed towards the Kickstarter for the band. So that'll be full quality audio and nice 4K video and all that kind of bizzo. So yeah. One question that gets asked quite a lot as well is, do you prefer analog over digital? Now, as you can tell, I'm an analog head. I have been for a very long time. But the truth is that over time, there have been some really incredibly talented coders who have created some excellent emulations. And in my world, I don't necessarily think that, well, yes, I'm an analog guy, but I don't dismiss digital. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the years to come, we're going to have a situation where we're not going to be able to distinguish between analog and digital. In fact, they're getting pretty close right now. So you can do really good work in the box using really good plugins. As far as I'm concerned, it's more about your ear and your technique than it is about the gear that you have in the rack. Some of you have asked about the gear that I use and to explain a little bit about it, so I will gladly give you a tour of the rack, as it were. Well, I've mentioned about my Manley custom-made console. We've gone through that, so let's talk a little bit about the processing. First up, I've got my Sontec MES 462C9 parametric equalizer. I consider it to be the Mac Daddy of all equalizers. It is a band stereo ganged EQ. It's got beautiful shelving on it. It is just it's just indispensable. I don't know any job that I cannot do it without. It's just that good. It really is. I consider it to be the Rolls Royce of EQs. Above that, I've got my Vertigo VSC2 compressor. It's a VCA style compressor. It's, again, indispensable in my rack. I think it gets used on 80% of the jobs I do, hence the reason I have them have one above the other, because I just like having them right there when I'm working. Further on, we move over to my Manley Verimute compressor, a tube compressor, beautiful box. Actually, it was the first analog box that I ever bought back in the 90s, so I have a very soft spot for this compressor. Beneath that is a Millennia NSEQ2 parametric equalizer, a nice transparent EQ, which actually has got the Fred Forsell modification. And Fred Forsell was actually here in this room, putting in the prototype of the upgrade that he made for this about 12 or 13 years ago now. So I'm very, very fortunate to have that in the rack. Also have a Crane Song compressor here, the STC8. Dave Hill, genius designer. I've got quite a bit of Crane Song gear. I love this compressor, very versatile. Just one of those things that can save a mix that isn't sounding too good, shall we say. It's just saved my bacon many, many times. Next along, my favorite color box, the Manley Massive Passive. Just an absolute humdinger of a valve EQ. It is, again, one of the things that gets used, quite a lot of jobs I use here. Again, one of those things that'll save a mix. Just beautiful tone, sounds fantastic, sounds lush. Makes things sound like they got money, if you know what I mean. Absolutely beautiful box, and I absolutely love it. Beneath that, my mastering version API 55Ms, which have been modified by API. And this thing too is a great little unit. The op amps in it sound fantastic. Quite often it's not one that I use a lot of processing with, but if I want to drive it for a little bit of attitude, the op amps in this sound tremendous, especially on rock albums. And yes, it did get used on this particular project. Another question that is most commonly asked is there any difference between mastering for digital, for online, or for vinyl? Because this album is actually going not only for digital format, but for vinyl as well. And the simple answer is, in my opinion, yes, there is. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily master for vinyl. Usually that's more of a commercial decision, and quite often you can really hear the difference. So not often do you do a heck of a lot to it, but there are some small differences that you have to take into consideration. And the reason that is because vinyl is a mechanical medium, and there are certain consequences that if you're not careful about what you do when you master it, you're not going to get the optimal cut that's going to be able to be tracked by a turntable. The digital world's quite different. It's ones and zeros, and no matter how much bass or how much phase or how loud or how soft, ones and zeros remain ones and zeros. But in the analog world, it's a little bit different. So the short-term answer is yes, I do master differently for vinyl, and I've taken the time and care to make sure that this album will translate as best as possible on vinyl format. Now, when it comes to the streaming services, there's been quite a lot of talk about mastering differently for the streaming services. And again, everyone's got their opinion on it. In my view, I don't necessarily worry too much about the streaming services. They tend to take your master and then will do something to it, whether they use their own algorithm, they will drop the level. They have their own process, and each service has its own way of doing it. They have their own proprietary technique of doing it, and quite often they're constantly changing. So it's no point trying to second guess what they're going to do. Now, of course, as I said, other engineers may have a different approach and may be successful doing it that way. I personally believe that a good master is a good master and it should translate anywhere. But when it comes to vinyl, that's the only time that I really would make any kind of exception and make a few little differences to make sure that it's optimal for that format. So there you have it. That's what goes on in a mastering studio. And hopefully you guys now have a bit more of an understanding as to how the process works. And I want to send a big thank you to A Sound of Thunder. Also, big shout out to Kevin Gutierrez at Assembly Line Studios. Thank you, my friend, for the great work you've done. And thank you for taking the time to see what goes on over here. Hey, if any of you guys are interested in getting your stuff mastered by me, I would love to hear from you. You can catch me at my website, www.jackthebear.com.au, or you can find me up on the socials on Facebook at Tony Jack Mance. And I also do a podcast called Mastering Music, Mastering Life, which has its own YouTube channel called Mastering Music, Mastering Life. Also have a Facebook called Mastering Music, Mastering Life. And my Instagram, surprise, surprise, is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. So you can catch me on any one of those platforms. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about mastering, maybe you want to send something in for me to have a listen to, and I'll be very happy to do so at no charge and at no obligation. We'd love to hear from you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.